Welcome to the Alternative Dog Moms podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom for more than 10 years. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I began raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott from the Believe in Dog podcast. For more than 10 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself. And I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned in case it could help you too. As the Alternative Dog Moms, Kimberly and I are bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and the brilliant people we're meeting along the way. Now let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
So I'm really excited for everyone to meet our guest today. Welcome, Elizabeth Johnson.
Thank you very much, Erin. I'm so glad to be here.
So we're really excited to dive into your book. And you said it comes out next week. So I think it'll come out like the day that this podcast gets uploaded.
Oh, great. Yay. Yes, September 10th. So
Wonderful. So you have to tell us like your origin story. How did you get involved with making animals your career? And, what led you to writing this book?
wow. Well, that's a long, long time ago, and giving away my age. So, I just learned to heal animals when I was a little girl, and my dad, we'd find a bird on the ground that may have hit a window, or a baby bird that fell out of a nest, or something like that, and he would just say, "Oh, sweetie, just pick it up and put it in your hands and hold it next to your heart and send it love." And then they would fly away out of my hands all the time. So I thought, oh, this is pretty pretty neat. I can do this. So then sort of as a little soldier of a kid, I took that on all the time. And then people were bringing me animals in the neighborhood and all sorts of stuff. And so it just sort of moved forward in my life. And fast forward, 30 years, then I started a practice and just felt like I really needed to work primarily with horses and things like that. I was a veterinary technician before that, so that was a little more regimented as far as being a technician. But I learned a lot about holistic medicine during my 20s, and so I just started to integrate that into the domestic world of horses and dogs primarily, but gosh, I've seen goats and you name it, anything that's domestic. And before that, I worked with wildlife and exotics as well. So I had some fun times with that as a tech. And so, yeah, so that started the journey. And then I discovered all kinds of cool things like traditional Chinese medicine, five element theory, which is what the book is about. And it's a lovely, lovely modality to be able to use. And I was fortunate enough to have a couple of very wonderful Beijing doctors, two separate ones that had moved to the US and just would go over all my cases with me and help me figure everything out. And then I did some veterinary acupressure programs and then more acupressure programs. And you just keep learning. There's so much to do with this five element theory. Um, and what happened with me was I would take a really good history on every animal I saw the first time. And then I'd hear about behaviors and I'd hear about sort of their quote unquote personality and what they did, or the owner trying to understand why they did what they did. Why do they do this? Why did they do that? And there were a lot of things like separation anxiety and things we have labels for now. And aggression, of course, and things like that, just so all sorts of stuff. So I would actually go through their body and I would determine what element that they were primarily in the five element theory. And then I would share that with the owner or the partner, whatever, the handler, and they would get fascinated by it. So not everyone didn't. It didn't always float everyone's boat, but a lot of people were really interested in it. And then the next visit, they would come in and they would say, oh my God, I finally understand my husband. He's a wood element. And I all these years that's been driving me crazy that he does that, and now I get it. And so this huge bucket of acceptance all of a sudden showed up for them in their marriage, or with a coworker, or with Aunt Mary at the family gatherings, and just on and on it went. And I heard so much of that through the years with working on thousands and thousands of animals. I would, you know, hear that. And then people started asking me, well, you like to write, when are you going to write the book about this? So that's sort of where it landed at this point. I just decided to write the book, and it's a fun book. In the five elements theory of traditional Chinese medicine is this huge ancient healing system. So it's big. It's got all sorts of facets that we work with as for the modality itself. But I just wanted to pluck out the fun part, which was the personality. And it was fun, but it was also really sort of like, I don't know. I keep coming up with the term of sort of global healing. It was really helpful for people to be able to find acceptance for someone they knew, and to sort of use that lens to heal the inside of their emotions, and then also to help have a better relationship, especially if they had to be in that relationship, or then no one has to be in one, but you know what I mean? Like you are married with kids, or you do have a family member that visits often that drives you crazy, or something like that. So I just really wanted to make the world a better place, and I figured I'd team up with the animals and do that. And so it's fun, and it's lively, and it's easy to learn. We really, the publisher and I and the editors, we really work to try to make it come in from all sorts of angles of how to determine the element, how to support the element, that the primary element the animals are, and then how to learn your own element as a human. So then you can work on relationship. And that piece of relationship is, the weaving of all of these elements. It's can be kind of a little complicated. So that's all in the book in a really easy to learn way. So that's the long story.
So I had a blast going through the book, and just jumped all over the tests. And I have three dogs, and they're three different ages, almost 11, 5 years, and just turned 2 years. And it was interesting going through, well, first reading through each of the elements. What was interesting to me was it was really easy for me to see my dogs within the elements and sort of see, I see a little here, a lot here, etc. What blew me away was how wrong I was about myself.
Oh,
So, like, before taking the test on myself, I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, yeah, I even highlighted it. I'm here and I'm here. And then as I went through and read and then took the test, I was completely wrong. And it made sense. Like, the test was right. Like, yeah, this is absolutely, it makes sense. And so that
Mhm.
was, I thought that was really fascinating. But my question is, and I did read this in the book, are dogs kind of a combination of all five, but just leaning towards one, two, or three?
Yes, you hit that right on the nail. So we all have five elements: dogs, humans, even cats. And I always say, everyone asks about cats, so I'm going to get this over with. Cats are cats. Some of them you could classify as elements, and some of them are just major shapeshifters in life, and so they do what they kind of want. So, but yes, we all have five elements, but we have a primary and often a secondary that's really strong too. And what we do, Kimberly, is we look at the primary element as, what is the main stressor? Like, how do those animals react under stress? Or how do you react under stress? Do you get angry? Do you get overexcited and almost like panicky, diva panicky? Do you get worried? Or uh, do you grieve and maybe not trust very well? and the last one is visceral fear. And so those will all fit in if we kind of go through the elements, those will all show up. And so there's a predominant stress response for every one of us, and we revert to that. And yet the secondary, sometimes you can have a secondary stress response, and we all have stress, right? We all have different ways we deal with it. And so that's really how you tell your primary is what is your major, how do you react when you have stress? It's all percentages. It's a matter of percentages. So your tertiary might show up. And then every once in a while in a season, because this is a nature-centric healing structure, so it's very close to nature. They developed it that way. The Chinese believe that humans were nature incarnate. So in other words, we weren't watching nature, we weren't observing or being in nature. We are nature. So that's how they developed this, is thinking of us as nature. And so certain seasons will stimulate each element that's in that season. So for instance, spring is the wood season. And so that's when we get the wood element rolling, and you get a little more competitive, and you have more potential. The spring potential for everything popping out of the ground and the leaves coming out of the trees, all of that can be incarnated in us as well, or the dogs. All of a sudden, they've got a lot of energy. They're vibrant. The competitive dogs really want to get going and get competing. And the thing I want everyone to think about as they read this is, or hear this podcast, is think about the element itself in that season. Like what would an element be? So wood, bursting forth with potential, really dynamic, competitive. Plants are competitive all the time on the ground, and trees are competitive, and just so much potential there. So that's a great way to think about wood, and I'll just run through this real quick. Fire it can be warm, it can cook your food, it can be that lovely campfire, or it can be a raging forest fire. So that's the emotional span of that animal. And that's in that season. It can be really hot in summer, or it can be kind of a nice, wonderful summer day. So it's all interrelated there. And then in earth element, we call that late summer. So it's like Indian summer kind of. And that's the element, that's the earth element season. And that is really about just kind of kicking back and relaxing and kind of getting grounded. So think about earth, right? We want to be grounded. And earth supports community, it supports family, and the earth element is all about that. These dogs love family, they're kid-loving dogs, and they're just in that mode. And then in the autumn, it's metal time. And metal's kind of cold, right? It's rigid. That's how we sort of start to feel before we get used to going into winter. And metal is not flexible. And so these animals are often not flexible in both their body and their mind, and sometimes their spirit. And so same with metal people. And then the water element is a winter element. So I always think of it's mysterious, it's quiet. If you look into a pond, you really don't know what's on the bottom. If you look into the ocean, you definitely don't know what's on the bottom, and so what's brewing in that water element that is so connected to that season. So the seasonal aspect is an important thing. And so someone like yourself, if you have a strong wood element, or you thought you did, in another season with your secondary element, you might start to feel that season strong and then start acting a little bit like that.
Yeah.
And the water elements, they're pretty amazing because they're shapeshifters too. And you have a water element when they show every single every single element archetype. They just kind of show up every day as somebody different. So
That's my youngest dog, Bella. She is a water element to a T. And it was one of those where that's why I asked the question of if they can embody all of the elements, because there are moments. So she's definitely, she's a very anxious dog. She gets scared easily, very timid. But I have a friend who lives on 15 acres and she has a lot of dogs, and I will just drive my dogs up there and we'll go on a pack walk.
Mhm.
Bella is a completely different dog when she's there. She's like ahead, leading the walk. She's running around. She's social. She's checking in with everyone. She's
Mhm.
not afraid. I've never seen her be afraid of anything.
Mm.
She might be a little like, I don't know what that is, but if she looks around, she's like, okay, we're okay. Or she'll
Mm.
find it, like if she doesn't want to go a certain way. There was a day she didn't want to go through the house. She didn't want to go through a doorway. So she just backed up and went around the house, and she's perfectly fine. Whereas
Mhm.
here, she would just be frozen. Like, I have no idea what to do, so I'm just going to sit here until I
Interesting.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
it's funny to me. Just this book was so much fun. It was just so
Mhm.
much fun to go through it. And I don't want to talk too much. So, Erin, ask a question, please.
Oh.
Well, so I have a general question and then a more specific to me question. So my general question was about, Kimberly and I are both involved in like the rescue and shelter community. And so I really loved that you covered like how to use this in connection with like a dog you're just doing like an intake on, right? And so uh would you, for our audience, like explain a little bit about how this can be a great tool in the rescue and shelter world?
Yes, for sure. And there is a fair amount in the book about that. So I was at Humane Society Expo in San Antonio just recently, and I gave a number of roundtables and things like that. Just trying to feel that out with the organizations and how do they feel. And everyone was actually very fascinated and supportive by
Oh,
it. The tricky part was how do we integrate it, and so I'm setting up at some point after I launch the book and have some time setting up a proposal of how it would fit in, and working with some software people on that are already doing rescue software. So we're going to try to put that in, but in answer to your question, I think that what we can do, I mean, it's basically like matchmaking. It is. It's like, I don't know, I don't do dating sites, but if anyone does listening to this, it's sort of like a dating site. So we classify the animal, and we have the classification of the archetype start with one of two ways. It's either the person that has to capture that animal out in the field, if it's a feral dog or a rescue dog that's run amok and nobody can catch it. What's the stress response? That's what we train everyone that is from the intake, whether it's rescue personnel or the person at the front desk taking the animal in. We train them to actually learn all the mechanisms that we need to get the information. So basically, the intake at the rescue would ask questions. If someone surrendered the dog, how does your dog act under stress? Or we really make it easy for people to figure that out, because it's some people just want to send the dog in and get rid of it and just hand it over, and other people really do care and can't take care of it, and so they want it to go to a good home. So there'll be some work we need to do with that, like what are the easiest questions when we do have a short quiz, not the quizzes like we have in the book, but real targeted for these animals. Are they aggressive? Are they, what are all the factors that are involved that person knows? When they're picked up as a rescue out in the field by, I have many friends that do that, including my husband has done that with feral dogs as well, and also with disaster situations where dogs are just, they're just dehomed accidentally, but and never return to their owners. So we will start there, and then we bring it through to the kennel staff, to where the kennel staff actually, if we can classify the animal as an archetype type, the kennel staff will actually take care of the wants, needs, and and understand what this animal wants as far as a walk or socialness or even food or touch. Do they like to play, or do they want to work play? Is it like, does this dog be better just doing a set workout for 5 minutes while they're out of their kennel? Or would it be better off, having a social aspect with maybe another dog? Or so we set all those parameters into the system, and that's on the dog's chart. And then after it comes off the dog's chart, if someone comes in and is looking for an animal, we do the matchmaking. So that's the system does the matchmaking. And then we also try to quiz whoever the adopter is, and see who they are. Because if they're, a 70-year-old person and they're really enamored with a wood dog, that wood needs movement, right? Movement's their medicine. I always say that wood dogs are, they're strong, they're athletic, and they don't do well. They do become aggressive dogs when they don't get what they need or want. And so that when we work with that sort of factor, and everybody kind of learns this, which is not hard to learn really, then we can get them in a good home and keep them in the home, and really try to support them in however they need support with that animal. So there's a couple scenarios in my book that you might have read about rescue dogs going into homes, and it can be really good, or it can be really bad. And then the dog gets rehomed again, and then all the factors that are not the best things that people want about that dog become more enhanced each time. So the goal is to get these animals in forever homes. And
Yeah, I thought this was a really cool tool. And, not everybody thinks of how you can use Chinese medicine or in that way, that it can even help, like you said, like from this matchmaking perspective, or I was even thinking of like the shelter staff perspective. Like I said, some dogs might want to play group, some dogs need to go for a really long walk, so, and I have this story. I have my dog Nessie, who we just adopted last year. She's snoring next to me right now. And she is a very wood dog. And I don't even know, Kimberly, if I've ever told this whole story on the podcast before, but so Nessie had been in a shelter last summer, and there was an outbreak of the canine influenza at the shelter. Nessie was one of like a handful of dogs that actually never got sick. And so they moved those dogs to an off-site location, but it was basically like a vet office, like a vet kennel. So instead of her being in a kennel dog run all day, she was now in like a vet crate all day.
Oh.
And she was only supposed to be there for 2 weeks, but because of the ongoing outbreak, she ended up being there for like a month. And there was a situation where somebody came, like a volunteer came to like let her out like for a walk that day, and something scared her. There was like a maintenance guy bringing some like equipment in, and it scared her, and she kind of lunged at the guy because it made this noise, and they were going to mark her for euthanization for being aggressive. And the volunteer ended up deciding to just foster her, and that was how I ended up adopting her from the foster mom. And so when you look at this, like she had no movement, it caused something to happen that was pretty much out of character for her. And now she's in nose work, and we're looking at, doing like titles and things with her because she needs such a job to do, so she is like exactly kind of that type to me.
Yeah.
But my question for you that affects our dogs here, if you look at this chart, like the quick reference chart, my guy Nino should be an Earth. But he also has a history of trauma that makes him like fearful around new people and fearful around children. So when I look at the quiz, I'm like, well, he doesn't really match it when you do the quiz, but I think it's because there's this like trauma, that has like
Mhm.
affected his personality. But like we call him Nurse Nino because like if you get a cut or something, he comes over and wants to like lick it and make it better or
Mhm.
things like that. And so are there things that can like trauma kind of thing, like can that like disrupt their type or cause them to have like another subtype? Are there things that affect that?
Yes, definitely. So one of the things about if it's early trauma at an early age, they often just come into the world as a water element because most water element animals have had early trauma and people have had early trauma, something super young right out of the box, and I have one Pretzel, she's that same way. And she's very similar to what you're saying. And so that can affect them. Trauma can affect them to react like another element in any way. It sounds to me like you have a dog that's primarily a water dog, but it has a secondary earth, which is really a lovely combination. And I'm just guessing that because it sounds like the reaction when there's stress is the fear. And a water dog's, or excuse me, an earth dog's reaction when there's fear is worry. They worry, they fret, and they can get obsessive. They can, and they want to eat, they want food. And they are nurturers and caregivers, but their primary thing really is about food and making sure everybody's counted for.
That's
Yeah,
me.
everybody.
That's me.
Oh, nice. I love Earth. I love Earth. I love them all, but I love Earth people and Earth dogs. I have an Earth dog, Wilbur. He's in my book too, and Pretzel's in the book, and a whole bunch of other dogs. But the Earth is, they're just lovely beings, but they're all strong constitutions. So if you have a water element that's fear-based, and let me just say one caveat here is a water element can be not fear-based too. And fear is, and I wrote this in my book, you may have read that part. A Chinese doctor told me one time, because I'm actually a water element, and he said, I was getting injured because I was doing all kinds of fun sports and, falling off mountains and things like that. And he'd always fix me. So I go into my acupuncturist and he'd fix me and he'd say, "You're a water element. What's up with this? Like, you have no fear." And I said, "Yeah, I don't feel fear. Like, fear is not my thing. I don't do fear." And he said, "Well, that's because you're an imbalanced water element. You're supposed to have fear. And so they're supposed to have fear." And so, but we do occasionally find one of those that in the animal world that doesn't have fear. So I would bet you'll have to watch it because the water element will shapeshift into the earth, and then it can shapeshift into anything else it wants to shapeshift into, and so and the seasonal aspects are also important. Like right now we're in earth time, so we're going to see in a lot of dogs, if they have a secondary or tertiary earth, we're going to see more earth coming out in them. And then when we hit autumn, we're going to see more metal coming out if there's a metal high up in their archetype aspect. So yeah, yeah, it's kind of fun. It's I don't know. It's kind of like a poker game sometimes. It's I don't play poker, but that just came up. Like you just not sure what you've got until you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you go, okay. And then you start to see the secondary, tertiaries, and all of that. And that was the goal with the quizzes, is to show that percentage wise where those are for animals and humans. Yeah. Because otherwise it's a bit of a crapshoot to determine, especially the water elements. because they are the ones that shapeshift all the time. And I think and to me they're the most fun and interesting because they're invested in us and who we are, and they want to be super sensitive and super close to us. And you did say the word that a sound
Yeah.
bothered your animal. And so the sense organs play a lot into this too, determining who they are. So the sense organ for a water element is hearing. So when they feel that visceral fear, it's often because of some loud noise
That was
happened.
Penny. That was
Y-
my girl Penny.
yeah, and that's and you remind me, I don't know you very well, Erin, but I would almost guess that you have a strong water element in you as well. So water attracts water, right? Water, rivers flow to the ocean, and and so if you think about it elementally, you're just attracting more water into your life, and maybe it's a secondary water your dog has, but you're kind of bringing that in. So that's really, really kind of really neat, when that happens. And so the go through the sense organs, the wood element is sight. So those animals have really good sight acuity. They really can see well. They are very strong protectors too, wood elements. And so that sight helps them to be a protector, a protection force for their people or for whatever it is.
Those are the working dogs and, like the police dogs. And
Yes.
I read the stories in your book. I
Yeah.
the story of the dog that never quite just relaxed,
Mm-hmm.
it would just take position while you did your work, but still
Yeah.
was looking around to check the area.
Yeah, Ivar. I loved that dog. He was so interesting. He was just always working, and yet, as I said in that story, I asked his handler, does he ever just want to play? And he said, "Oh yeah, when we're done working, he stops and he demands play." And so he would demand and that's that would personality, like they're aggressive about what they want, and so they're gonna and they like regiment, but the routine based ones are the earth ones. They're the ones that are 2 minutes away from dinner and they're coming to get you, and licking their lips and like, can we eat now, so they're very, very routine based, and those are support mechanisms for these animals. So keeping an earth element routinely eating primarily, but in other ways too, having a routine is a support mechanism for them. So that's one thing we go into is a lot of the needs and wants become, they just reflect the support for the animal. And the earth element it thinks it needs food, and I mean, we all need food, right? But they need a little bit more, I think. So yeah.
So one thing that I really liked was the sort of like not only just the stressors and basically how to overcome the stressors. So for example, with the fire dog, I have one, Apollo. He's super affectionate. He loves everyone, and understanding that if he doesn't get that, that's when he's going to act out. So that's what he gets. So for instance, when I take him for walks, there are certain people, we have a trail that borders our property. There are certain people that he's come to know,
Mhm.
and they know him. They know, hey, Apollo. And so we stop so he can have his time with them. And
Perfect.
it makes our walks. And it's funny because just like Erin started with the nose work and things, you just figured out what your dog needed and acted on it. I did that and acted on for my dog because I was like, it's not hurting me to allow him to engage with this person and it makes him happy. But I didn't really make the connection to the fact that he's a husky mix. So our walks were pretty much him dragging me along the trail. Since I started allowing him to do this, we have loose, it's no problem. We have the easiest walks and it's amazing. I
Isn't
mean, he
that
still
amazing?
will, reach and stretch for certain things, but our walks from the start to finish are loose leash walking. And I've had him for 5 years. So it's just like, wow. So my question beyond that is, with the health issues with each element.
Mhm.
Can you go into more of that? Like, for instance, what was it? Earth was digestion. I think was it Earth was
Mhm.
digestion.
Mhm.
Just how that works, and then how we can sort of use that maybe as a preventative. So to sort of like to, because I think with fire, was it liver or is
Um,
that wood?
that's
That's liver
wood, yeah.
and gallbladder, so that we can sort of support our dogs
Yeah.
preemptively.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we'll go around the clock again with the season. So season for wood is spring, and that's liver time and gallbladder time. So what the Chinese did, this is when we're kind of reaching into that giant healing system a little bit, not just playing with the personality, but it's important for people to know these things as well. So we just touched on them a little bit in the book. So spring is liver time. And if anybody does any holistic health for themselves, you'll see in springtime, especially now that we are all online, liver detox time, detoxing, everybody's going to start selling liver detox stuff because we all know that the spring is about liver. So the liver and gallbladder rule the ligaments in the body in Chinese medicine, the tendons, ligaments, and what we call sinews. So they're all the little pieces of fascia and things that attach to bone and muscle. And so what happens with wood dogs is they like to be athletic. They need the movement, so they're moving, and they're so competitive and determined, they will push themselves to a maximum boundary in their physicality to do agility or to run and get that bunny on the other side of 2 acres, or something like that. And so what that'll do is, if they're not balanced in their health and all the supportive mechanisms aren't in place, then they become imbalanced, and then those tendons and ligaments, which are ruled by the liver and gallbladder, the tendons and ligaments become weaker and so more apt to strain. So we see a lot of wood element dogs that have CCL issues and, chronic and all sorts of things like that's the primary one that we mostly see. So that's how that works. And what we do for them, one thing that I discovered a long time ago, I used to do a lot of herbs with animals, and I discovered that my wood element animals that I was working with, horses and dogs, were getting better faster when I gave them herbs than the other ones with herbs. It was just like across the board, and probably like a 5-year study sort of. I did a very informal one. And I kept saying, wow, that's interesting. And what I realized is that the synergy of springtime, where herbs are coming out of the ground and they're bursting forth, they're full of potential. Am I sounding like a wood dog here, right? They're full of potential, they're full of all the really strong juices to make them vital and move forward, they're full of resilience. And that's what the wood dogs are all about. That's their archetype. And so they were just, the synergy for them with herbs is really profound. And I always recommend that someone find a really good herbalist to work with. Don't just buy something willy-nilly off the internet. Get some targeted help for that. Even though there are great herbs out there. But if that company has customer service where you can kind of get some framework for what you need, then you're going to have a better response with that. Or a practitioner that of course, is the best way usually, because they'll know the animal and they'll get a sense for the animal. So that's one with liver and gallbladder and wood. Fire is different. Fire is heart, pericardium, triple heater, and small intestine. So it has four, and fire's kind of, complex and expansive, so it's not surprising. But in the heart part is really what makes the animal have panic attacks and just kind of goes, it has excess joy. So that's what happens with these fire elements is they have so much fun. They're like the party diva. They love everybody. They're getting adored like crazy. And they have this, I call charismatic magnetism is my term for them because they're like everybody wants to come and touch them and say hi and do that. And they love it. So they get over adored, if there is such a thing. And when you think about excess joy, you think it'd be fun, but excess joy can bring you to a peak where your whole nervous system is just like, and then they panic. And I always think in the old black and white movies where the actress diva would put her hand on her head and she'd faint and she'd go, oh, and she'd faint because she was being so loved and so adored and so famous. And that's how these dogs react. And so what we have to do during that process, just really quick, because I always want to share this, is we have to ground ourselves because once they get way up here, and that's called heart fire, which is why I'm bringing this up with the organs. If they're way up here and we're way up there because they're in a dog park and all of a sudden, they were playing, having fun, and next thing you know, they're nipping at everybody and you can see they're in panic mode. And so what we do is we have to stop for a second. Don't run in screaming, and don't run in grabbing. Stop, take 2 seconds and take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Really important to ground yourself because the dog is a helium balloon right now, and you don't want to be another helium balloon just floating up in the air. So put your feet on the ground, feel them, breathe, feel your feet one more time just to make sure, and then you can go over and manage the dog. And there's a wonderful point, and I know it's a podcast, but I'm going to describe it. It's called Yin Tong, and it's in the book, so you can always find it there. It's right between the eyebrows of all of us, including dogs. So it's not low in between the eyes, but it's right, there's a little hollow. Some people call it the third eye, right between the eyebrows. And that's Yin Tong. And if you just get that dog and get him out of the fray or her out of the fray, and you start rubbing that up and down, nose to forehead, and you just do it slow, and the dog will start to calm down because that point cools the heart fire. So these animals have a lot of heat in their body. They're a fire animal. And so they've just basically turned into the forest fire in their own being because of all the excess joy. So I hope this is making sense for everyone.
It does.
And so what we need to do is cool the fire. So we use the yin tong. Small intestine has a big relationship with the fire element and the heart and the pericardium. And so, and triple heater is sort of like it regulates our thyroid, it regulates a lot of our endocrine system. It's a complicated, we don't call it that in Western medicine. We break it down into different aspects, but in Chinese medicine, it's called triple heater. And that is, that's keeping the coolness in the body. It's keeping everything regulated, all that heart fire. So when this animal gets imbalanced because it's got separation anxiety, it's not going out enough, it's not getting adored enough, or it's getting adored too much and it's just overloading, then we have to take some steps back and really look at that and get that animal balanced. So, and then the other ones are a little quicker. The earth element is pretty easy. There's a spleen and stomach, and spleen and stomach are obviously digestive meridians, and they run right by the stifle area, the hind leg, what some people call knees, but it's actually their stifle where the CCL ligament is. And they are, they're foodies, and this is all digestive. Like in Chinese medicine, spleen has a lot to do with digestion. And it's actually the queen of all the other organs. One of my Chinese doctors, I would bring him in my cases and he'd go, "Oh, treat the spleen. She's the queen. And he would always say that spleen's the queen. And so I learned that the spleen we just think it's this extra organ in our body that holds a lot of blood inside. But it actually, in Chinese medicine, has a lot to do with digestion. So that's where, our foodie dog, the earth, needs to keep digestive enzymes in their food for balance, don't allow them to get overweight. They can really get heavy just by looking at food sometimes, some of these dogs. And so it's a matter of managing that really well for those two organs. And you will also have CCLs in those dogs if they're overweight because they're imbalanced. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I had Sydney. I'm thinking of my Sydney.
Kahlua.
Yeah, everyone always has dogs, when they talk about these things. And so then we go to the metal element, and the metal is lung and large intestine. So in the human world, holistic world, lung is known to be a grief organ. So a lot of times when people are grieving really heavy, have had some really tough stuff, they end up with a respiratory issue, and often a lung respiratory issue. And so it's real common. Pneumonia is common with heavy grievers. And so these animals, the metal animals, they grieve the loss of a handler. They really grieve the loss of a job because they are so purpose driven. They need a job. If they don't have a job, they're going to make a job. Which might not be what you want them to do. And so we look at that, and we always are looking at lung and large intestine for them. They will more often than not, they'll become constipated as opposed to having diarrhea with the large intestine. So they will tend to block everything down. Like, think about metal, rigidity, right? It's hard, it's cold, so that's all going to come into play with those organs when there's an imbalance in the animal. And that's with every single archetype. If there's an imbalance, the organs are going to start having to work to balance themselves out in the body. And then the water element is kidney and bladder. And the bladder meridian runs down the spine. It goes from, and it's a very long meridian. And so a lot of water element dogs have long backs, and people have long backs. They might have short legs and long backs. So you look at some dogs and you go, oh, that's kind of something's out of balance. The back's a little long. Well, that's probably a water element dog. And the bladder meridian runs right next to all the vertebrae in the little divots. On my website, I actually have a Good Morning Spinal Wake Up that people can
Yeah.
People can get, yeah, and you just run your fingers down, you fall in these divots and you go wiggle, 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 wiggle.
Apollo loves it.
Yeah, it's so good for them, and it's so good for every old dog. It's good for every dog. And yeah, they'll come and ask for it all the time, once you start doing it, because it feels so good. So you're stimulating every organ that comes out of the nerve. You're stimulating the bladder points that work with those organs, and you're stimulating all the lymphatic flow in the whole body while you're softening some muscles around the spine. So it's like, if I could get every single person that had a dog to do that, we would have less veterinary problems. I could guarantee it. So, but they're kidney and bladder meridian run down the back legs, and they go in and out of what we call the hock back there. So there's some great points right on that hock. Those are also on my website and a YouTube. I'm going to have a YouTube channel fairly soon, and a lot of that stuff will just be all thrown up there for people to just access. And so the bladder and kidney are just really pivotal, important meridians, and they're really related to fear. What happens when you really, really, really get scared about something? You're kind of holding your Yeah, yeah. You're holding your bladder and you're kind of, you can evacuate. Animals will evacuate, horses going into trailers and things like that. If they don't really like trailers, they will almost always pee right at the edge of the trailer. They evacuate right there. So there's an essence of fear that definitely is highly related to bladder and kidney meridian. And I kind of hope that answered that
It does
you asked.
perfectly.
Yeah, it's a part that's hard was hard to go into too deep in the book.
Mhm.
So,
I thought it was perfect level because you're not trying to diagnose, you're not encouraging people to use. In fact, you say, don't use this to treat this. This doesn't replace, your veterinarian, but it is a way of just better understanding. As you said at the top, you just have a better understanding. As I was reading the book, I could see each of my dogs and I could understand, like with Bella, she, for the first 6 months, she would have submissive peeing. And it was when she was really
mhm,
startled or
Nino
unsure.
does.
Yeah. And it was just
right.
like, it just, everything sort of fell into place. And so it's
Yeah.
just very helpful.
Yeah, great. Good. I love hearing that. So, yeah, and when we can keep them balanced, we have a lot less stress on the organs, on the tendon ligaments, on everything involved with that. And so that's the whole goal is to get those supportive mechanisms out there and people doing them. And some are already doing them, obviously. And some unknowingly are doing them, but I really want people to know, like, this dog needs this. The wood element is the classic example. It needs movement. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but it's fun and it's hopefully put in the book well enough for people to be able to access it in their lifestyle.
So, as part of the supportive process for each dog, we touched on the fact you give different like acupressure points that are supportive. Can you just give us like a little overview of like how to use acupressure and like some of the do's and don'ts?
Yes, yes, and there's a lot of that in the book. We were really careful with that. So the best way, so I guess I'll start with someone coming and seeing those acupressure points. And first, try to locate them in the best way you can. I always tell people there are so many wonderful courses out there that you can take for these two. Two, if I might mention two people, one is Susan Tenney at Elemental Acupressure, and she is amazing. She's been teaching around the world for as long as I've been doing healing work. She's been doing it, and she's been teaching. She has really fun classes. She has a community, and it's just great. And she's a really fun gal. She's real lively and just got all the great energy in the world. And then there's Tallgrass Acupressure. They're another organization that teach mostly live. Susan has live and online courses. Some of them are really inexpensive for beginner people that don't want to be a practitioner. And so they're really great. Tallgrass, I believe, is all live. So those are two nice recommendations that I would highly recommend for people to learn this. And the biggest thing is doing it at a time that is good for you and the animal. You don't want to be stressed when you do acupressure. You don't want the animals stressed. You don't want them hungry or having just eaten. And you want to check in with yourself, just like you did for the fire dog, only even more. You want to check in and check what am I thinking about? Is my mind quiet? Somewhat quiet. That's hard a lot of days for everyone. But try to quiet down, stop thinking about, you have a friend coming over for lunch, or you have, oh, I think I hear the mailman, or, things like that. And just get quiet and find a comfortable spot for the animal. And that's kind of a cuddle spot or whatever. And then find your points and breathe, because when you breathe you move your chi. So you need to breathe, or else your animal won't breathe well, because they are masters at knowing exactly what we're doing. And if we're not breathing, especially if it's a horse, a prey species that fear is their livelihood. If it's a horse, then you really need to be breathing because they'll be looking for the mountain lion to come out of the trees or whatever. They'll be thinking that something's wrong because you're holding your breath. Dogs will think, oh, maybe there's some prey around. So they're a predator, right? So that's how they think, I believe, and I've watched this so many times. When you hold your breath, especially if your hands are on them, then they think, oh, what's going on? Like something's out there, not in a bad way, but should I be on alert to go get it and with you? And so I think that that's one of the biggest things is to just breathe when you're doing it and make sure you're taking breaths. And then you find your spot, and then you just really set your fingers on that area. And some people like to rub, and some spots like to be rubbed, some acupressure points. Some like just quiet putting your finger on there. And that's really, and some people like to do that, just hold the energy on there. And if you put your maybe two fingers or one finger if it's a really small dog, if you set your hands on there and you just get quiet for a minute and you take a big breath, the animal's going to relax. The animal is going to start to kind of vibrate a little bit under your fingers. Some people can feel that, some can't. But everyone can feel it. You just have to tune in and do it regularly. And then you'll go, oh, can feel that a little bit. And then you just hold that point. And it's really, really actually very simple. Don't try not to think too much while you're doing it. That's always the biggest challenge for everyone. And just think of it as like a little meditative time, a short period. If the animal's sick or has an injury or has a wound or is on certain medications or is pregnant, we really don't like people to be, you shouldn't be doing it unless you're a practitioner and you are working with a veterinarian that is aware that you're doing that. So those are pretty much the main caveats. The pregnancy one is important because some of those points can move things in the body. They can dilate, they can do all kinds of things. And I have done that many times for people when they have breech births or a known animal that doesn't have an easy birthing time. I've been contacted and I've even done it for one human, which I was mortified to do, but the doctor wanted me to do it because otherwise she was going to have a C-section, and she was my dear friend. And so it does work. You can affect the system if they're pregnant. So it's very, very, very important not to do that. They're called forbidden points when you're pregnancy. So yeah. Yeah. So unless you of course know what you're doing in there. So but it is fun to watch the animals, the babies. I did a mini horse a couple of years in a row because she always had bad births. She was a little black mini horse and I always had a crowd watching, and she would always have the baby in the wrong position. And so the foal. And so you could watch the foal after I did the point kicking its way around her belly and getting into position. And we would do that like 2 to 3 days before. So we made sure everything was fine for the birth, and it was it's fascinating to do that, but it's only for qualified professionals to do. And so we stated that as many times as we could in the book, do not do this on pregnant animals. So yeah, because you could easily abort an animal by doing the wrong thing. So yeah.
Our vet showed us a spot to do with Nino when he has some indigestion issues at night. And so if he's having a rough night, I'll sit up and, rub. I think it's kind of, it's on his kind of near his wrist, and it's either right above or right below that kind of little knobby thing.
Yeah, that's pericardium 6 probably, right, in this area. And then large intestine 4 is a good one. That's the one between the web of your thumb and your forefinger. And that's another nice one. That's great. It's an elimination point. it's an everything point. It does a lot. It's sort of like salt in food, but it does have a strong elimination capacity. So eliminating things from your body. And it definitely works because one time I was chopping, I mean, I did it on a lot of animals, but when you have it happen to yourself, I was chopping something and the knife slipped and it went and pierced my large intestine 4 right between my web. And then I was like, okay, so I'm trying to, stop bleeding and everything. And then I went, oh, and it was the wrong time of the day for me to have to run into the bathroom and eliminate, but I did. And I was like, well, that really works. I'm sorry, that's kind of funny to tell, but my cheeks are pink. But yeah, so it is, that's another good one if they're like for metal dogs when they get constipated and things, it's a really good one. And yeah, and stomach 36 is another nice one, and that's in the book, and that's a good one for digestion. With the earth dogs, particularly, this I want to make mention. They really should have enzymes in their food all the time. And I think I started to mention that. But that really helps them with their digestion. And you can get enzymes don't get enzymes that aren't just pure enzymes with a whole bunch of other stuff in them, and even herbs and things. There's two naturally, let's see, dogsnaturally.com. They're in Canada, but they ship to US all the time. They have a really good one. And Glacier Peak Holistics out of Montana, they have a really good enzyme. And those are the two I use with Wilbur, because Wilbur's an earth dog and he needs, he does way better on the enzymes. So just a couple good companies that are keeping it pure and doing it right, I feel like. So yeah.
Well, great. I'll put links to those for everyone, and also to the acupressure classes that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, we don't have to dive into it, but I just want to mention for everyone, that you also mention in the book like extra support for our older dogs, because again, my guy Nino is an older guy, and you've also done a TEDx talk too about senior dogs. So I'll make sure that we have a link for everyone to that also.
Yeah, and the publishers asked me for my next book to be on old dogs. So it will probably be similar to the TEDx in that it'll be the parallels of old dog and human aging, but it has, it's going to be primary old dogs. And I have a human geriatric person helping with some of the aging parts, just to make sure we have a qualified person to talk about that besides me, because I am aging. But yeah. And actually my book launch is I'm going to do a virtual book launch too, and I don't have the date fully set, but my book's coming out on the 10th. So if anyone pre-sale orders or anything, they'll have it by then, and it'll be fun. So
Well, yes, we will have links so everybody can order their book, Know Your Dog's True Nature by Elizabeth Johnson. And we're so grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. That was really fun. Thanks.